One thing I would do throughout the day, if you're anxious, is to extend those exhales. You can put your hand on your heart to breathe into a count of about 4 and breathe out to count about 6 or even 8 if you can do that comfortably. And every time you breathe out, you're going to feel your heartbeat slowing down, because that's eliciting a relaxation response. The more you exhale, the more you're going to relax yourself. These are free tools. You're not going to hurt yourself doing them. We know they work, and it's just a wonderful thing to have at your disposal anytime.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We have just finished our podcast, and we'd like to introduce you to this epic yarn with James Nestor. Look, he's just the guy that's every now and then things attached to someone, Gareth? And James is the guy. He's got the consciousness. He's been on Rogan. He's talking about slow nasal breathing and all the health benefits. What a buzz, to talk to the man himself.
Yeah, just my mind is blown. That was a great chat. He is incredibly insightful. He is incredibly intelligent. Very passionate about what he does as a journalist, and he's dived pretty deep into the whole breathing world. So it was amazing to have a chat to somebody who is as passionate about we are.
That's right. And I guess for people, like, you can find a lot of James, and obviously he's got like a 6 to 7 hour audio book, but like, we really made an effort to show you the other side, or not the other side, but a different side. Like, what was it like after Joe Rogan? And he talks about that. That's a hilarious story. And also, like, for me, it was interesting, like, what's in it for him? And I got the feeling, bro, that he just gives a damn, and it's so needed in today's world, like, we live in a time where the algorithm controls our feelings, and these big characters come out to dominate. And isn't it nice that brewing under there is these kind of conversations about ultimately control your breath if you want to control anything else, and if
control
you don't, then that's right. And we, he beautifully articulates the kind of the wave between medicine and like modern day medicine versus traditional. And was there any takeaways for you, Gareth?
For me, it was probably, just sort of touching on your point, just how well he articulated how important the breath was to health. And there's so much information out there, and there's been research done in the, as he said, the 20s and the 30s that is coming back to light now that hasn't been able to be. People haven't disproved this stuff. With talking about ADHD, talking about asthma, talking about emphysema, like, just it's amazing in terms of what we now know and what was known back then, and it hasn't changed.
Right.
We've just misplaced the information, I guess. That was the standout for me.
Yeah, and I'll second that, man. I mean, the whole lot was a buzz. Very humble man, but it's like he plays a role, and I mean, one of the things we laughed about in this is his book was launched, I guess, kind of not obviously, but during the whole time we're running our business, right? So the fact that there's a groove or timing is so nice that we can actually have this as a tool to help with education. And so I'll just do a quick plug to our business. So it's Manava Breathing, and look, there's a lot here, but what I do want to say is, if you're interested in breathing better and understanding breathing better, then you are better off by coming to Gareth and I, particularly because Gareth is the first master instructor for Oxygen Advantage here in New Zealand. And this is huge. There's only one of us here, and that's you. And I know Gareth is getting more humble.
Yeah. Yeah. I am. That's me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you. That's you, buddy. Let me keep selling. So, Look, the easiest way to get in touch with us is visit www.manavabreathing.com. There's our bios there. We work with community. We work with the sports teams, and this means also community, business, and all of these things. So if you want to breathe stronger, breathe healthier, breathe better, do visit us. And I think on that note, let's jump into this episode with James Nestor. And if you're lucky, at the very end, Gareth tries to make James an official model for Gareth's skincare business, Dark Heart.
Yeah.
So that's right, James. I don't know if you agreed to that, but some product is on the way. So we expect to see it on Insta. All right, team, enjoy the episode, and we'll see you guys at the end.
Well, you know what? Let's just do this and see what happens. If it starts echoing, then we'll see what happens. So far, so good. It's just this sometimes starts echoing.
Yeah, we can hear you, which is great.
Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna take a risk here in life and see what happens, and
just go with it.
You mean we're gonna enter in a slight fight or flight, which is
exactly little sympathetic response here happening. No, it's all good.
Awesome. Well, James, I'm recording, and we kind of like to keep it reasonably casual because we're New Zealanders. I mean, Gareth is a Brit, but he's been here forever.
Adopted,
so you know, we're pretty casual down this part of the world. Have you been down here, James? Have you come to New Zealand and had a look around?
I had a 16-hour layover years and years ago where I went and watched a movie and fell asleep in the theater. So I did not get to see too much of New Zealand that way.
What movie?
This was so long ago, man. You can see how old I am. It was something Spider with Morgan Freeman. I forget the name of it. Not super memorable either. So
no, clearly not.
But you know, I got my scoop out of you. Something different than the other hundreds of podcasts. Just on the amount of requests you must get. I mean, is it manageable? You know, are you all good with having so many people wanting to talk to you?
Well, it's interesting going from sitting in a room for 2.5 years, writing every day, not talking to anybody except for people in the field of research, where it's then just the same conversation, little bits of new data, but same sort of person. And then you're talking to people all over the place. So I love this. It'd be a lot more fun if I was able to get out on the road and do this in person. A lot of people hate touring. I love it. Free meals, talk to people. That's the only thing you have to do is talk about the book. Like, how hard is that? But, it's a modern age. And so now I'm here with, sitting in front of a bookshelf and talking to you guys in another country. So that's how it works.
James, were you prepared for just how big the book was going to be?
No, it's so funny because we weren't going to release the book this year because distribution's messed up, printing is messed up. The book had been slated to be released on May 26th. And the way the books go, unlike other industries, is it takes 6 months for a book to be in a catalog before it comes out. So you're basically done with the book 8 or 10 months beforehand. So obviously we had no idea any of this was going to happen, which was pretty funny when the book was released. And some people wrote me, they're like, "Oh, real convenient. Putting your book out about breathing during COVID. Real entrepreneurial." I'm just like, dude, I've been working on this thing for 5-6 years. And it was in the catalog 6 months beforehand. So we weren't going to put it out. And then my editor's like, you know what? People need to think about their breathing right now amidst this pandemic. And I said, okay. So we thought we were just going to release it and then pick it up and tour the next year just to get it out and forget about it. But it's been a complete trip. Yeah, just so surreal for me to be through this process. But I'm also completely stoked. So I'm not going to lie. It's been awesome. It's been super fun.
Well, it's been interesting to kind of see how things have attached, the narratives together. I mean, definitely when we got into breathing early in the COVID, and I mean, Gareth, you've been into breathing for years, but for me, what I had was a heightened sense of what the hell's going on. We were all on lockdown and you start looking out, and luckily I had interviewed Patrick McEwen before that. So I went back through and then the trail began, and there's this like Avengers team of, Patrick, yourself, Dan Brule, and we've luckily we've got all of you guys, because it's like, there seems to be something there, and it's about just sitting down and talking about this, because how the hell do you explain breathing? It's a tricky one, particularly those who, like, we say the breath like 100 times a day, Gareth and I, but for most people that still means what? Bad breath, good breath. It's a really interesting, I don't know, what would you call it? Just, is it a movement? Is it an unlocking of consciousness because of this COVID?
Oh, I think it's a bunch of things happening. I think this movement's been around for a very long. I mean, you really want to go back in time. It's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And breathing was always celebrated in Eastern cultures as a vital medicine. I mean, it really was. You're sick, breathe this way. You're well, breathe this way, and you can stay well. And Westerners it's just completely slipped from our consciousness. Even though the science has been so clear on this, this is what I couldn't understand, is this stuff had been studied at Yale, at Harvard, Boston University, UCLA. I mean, every major institution been finding it has a huge benefit. Doesn't matter if you've got mental health problems, physical problems, emphysema, asthma, I mean, you name it. And no one disproved any of those studies. And those studies are still holding up. And yet, who is focusing on the breathing? Nobody. So it was a little maddening finding this research over and over and over again. These people that discovered this thing, and then it just went away. So I'm not a researcher. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a breathing therapist. I'm a journalist who went into this world and just objectively tried to understand it. And it was a complete pain in the butt. It was so hard because people are telling you, two different doctors telling you exactly opposite things. Breathing doesn't matter. Mouth, nose, 20 times a minute, 10 times, doesn't matter. The other person says breathing is everything. If you're not breathing right, you're doing nothing. So luckily, breathing is very easy to measure. What I mean by that is you can put very simple sensors on for heart rate variability, blood oxygen, nervous system function, galvanic skin response, all of this, fMRI if you want to go that far. And you can see how dramatically just switching your breath will change your nervous system function, your circulation, your heartbeat, your mental function, on and on. That's the great thing. It's not just like, here, breathe this way. And how do you feel? Oh, I feel better. Cool. That must work. It's, why don't you look at the data and look at the graphs and look at the x-rays? And that's what was so convincing to me, is there's just hard data on this stuff showing what a profound influence it has on our well-being and everything else.
And prior to the research, was there an aha moment where you were like, oh, actually, I am a pretty bad breather? Or were you pretty good with your own breathing practices prior to sitting down and nutting the book out?
Well, I wasn't very good about a long time ago, 10, 11 years ago, when I was eating well, I was fit, I was surfing, I was sparring a lot, I was boxing, I was doing all this stuff, but I was just constantly sick and with a lot of respiratory problems. And I thought this was just par for the course. People are like, oh, well, yeah, you're getting older, man. So that's all natural, but it didn't sit right with me. So there's that side of it, but then there's also the side, the real aha moments come when you see people like free divers who are doing things that are supposed to be impossible, that according to pulmonologists, they're like, no, if you hold your breath longer than 2 minutes, blood cycles, permanent brain damage. All of that is false. And I'll show you. And so learning that, you're like, well, what else is wrong? And where else can breathing take us? And so you're able to just go out. Freediver is just a very small part of it. The stuff that really impressed me is the stuff looking at emphysemics who were just literally left for dead, and they're still left for dead today. And finding that breathing therapy, these people just got up and walked out of the hospital.
Yeah,
it's pretty bizarre, but it also makes perfect sense at the same time.
Are you still mouth taping? Because I only ask because you guys have got good beards on you, and I know Gareth and I have conversations. Well, we've all got beards. Yay! I realized something, but we have this conversation about what's the optimal mouth taping, and you can go back and forth with this stuff. What's your technique?
Well, everyone's got their own way of doing things. And so if people want to use the fat strip, that's fine with me. If people want to use the X, that's cool. Some guy on YouTube, don't know if you see it, is really into 9 pieces, takes him about 10 minutes. Who am I to say? He's just breathing through his nose. But what I found, and of course I have a little roll right here for you, for people who are listening and not watching this, I'm getting out a little piece of hypoallergenic tape, but I need about this much tape, which is about half the size of a U.S. postage stamp. I don't know how big they are in New Zealand. And this is this radical technology, everyone.
That's right.
A piece of tape comes off with your tongue. And, there's been some blowback by people who are saying, if you vomit in your sleep, you can asphyxiate and it's just so beyond comprehension because you saw how easily that piece of tape came off. But people believe what they want to believe. And there's been a lot less of that and been a lot more of, I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of emails of people, snores for 30, 40 years, sleep apnea, 30, 40 years. They're like, I'm no longer snoring. Look, what the hell? Why didn't someone tell me about this? And that's how I felt. So to answer it, that's a very long-winded way of saying I still do it. Some people have the big, powerful jaw structure that no matter what, their mouths are closed. I'm not one of those guys. I had braces and extractions and all that crap. Like my wife, real nice jaw. She doesn't need this crap, but I do every single night, and I use it every single night. And if I don't, I feel it.
We have you heard of Dr. Jim Bartley? He's an ear and nose specialist here in New Zealand. Patrick put us on to him, but when we were talking to him, I've read your book, I've heard mouth taping, I do it, yet when I think about it, I'm still like, ooh. So I said to, this guy who's been telling people for 30 years to breathe through your nose and, gets lawyers writing to him saying, you didn't help me, you just told me to breathe through my nose, etc. And I said, so thoughts on taping your mouth, doctor? And he's like, looked at me like, I've been telling people to do that for 30 years, totally safe. And I was just like, but it's like we need this over amount of babying to change this, whatever we've been doing unconsciously, the mouth jacked open type thing.
Well, this is what just confounds me and continues to confound me. So people will say, and not many now, like Stanford's, I heard about this from Stanford. I heard about it from Mark Rahane. He's like, yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years with kids with ADHD. And then they no longer have the symptoms of ADHD. So he's researched it. And I just talked at Stanford Medical School. Yale's starting to talk about this. So it's really coming out of the bag. But when you hear people saying, oh, tape your mouth, that's just crazy. There's nothing crazier about snoring and about sleep apnea and about breathing through your mouth for a third of your life, causing so much damage to your brain, to your body, to your metabolism, to your lungs. And we know this. There's no controversy that if you snore, if you have sleep apnea, you are just beating your body up every single night. So in my mind, I would find any way possible of stopping that. CPAPs are good. They work for a lot of people. That's cool. They do nothing for the core problem. They don't, but I know that they're total lifesavers. And why wouldn't you try a piece of tape that costs like a half a cent? This roll, it's $3. It's going to last me 3 months. And if it's not your bag, then that's okay. Because what did you just lose? So these simple things that aren't asking people to go out of their way, that we know can profoundly affect your health. Why wouldn't you do it?
That's right.
With the breathing, James, obviously you're a bit of a surfer and you look like you live the lifestyle. Have you seen a benefit to your paddling performance? I come from a strength and conditioning background, so that's kind of where I'm leaning towards, the human performance element of Will's the business that we have together. Have you seen a benefit with the breathing that you've done in terms of being out there for longer, being fitter?
It's hard to say because I didn't really look at any metrics before and after, but I can say that taking control of your breathing, as I saw very, very clearly in the Stanford experiment, and I've seen clearly for years talking with other people and going through my own transformation of trying to improve my breathing is it has such a powerful and significant effect. And, some people might say, oh, it's placebo effect, really strong. Again, measure it. Look at the numbers and look at the research. And I'm happy to talk to anyone who's apprehensive about this. But what I've noticed is a lot of those people don't actually want to talk. They just want to sort of poo-poo your thing and move on. But as far as my paddle strength and performance, I would say, especially with breathing out of the nose, hiking around this, I'm in San Francisco and there's crazy hills all over the place that it's such a difference breathing through your nose for recovery and your perceived exertion and everything. It's so much easier once you get it. But a lot of people try it for 2 days. They say, my performance decreased. How is this helpful?
Yeah. I can't do it. It's too hard. I can't do it.
Well, your performance is going to decrease, people, but you have to acclimate to it, and then it's going to go through the roof. And we've seen this in so many studies, but a lot of people want instant gratification. And so a couple of days of doing something, if they're not seeing benefits, they'll give up. But a lot of people also know that sometimes you just got to do the work, and it could take weeks or months to get over that bump. But once you do, I mean, I didn't think I could breathe through my nose surfing, but for the last couple of years, I've been just, a little water gets in there, but you can blow it out and then you can breathe through your nose. And I've noticed not only do I think I have improved endurance and performance, but I'm so much calmer on bigger days than, oh, here comes a big wave. I'm not going to make it. If you're breathing through your nose, you just kind of become this machine. You're just, I can take this, I can handle it. And that's a great side effect.
We had a great chat to one of the Bondi rescue guys, Dean Gladstone. He's a Wim Hof instructor as well as a Oxygen Advantage master instructor with myself. And he was speaking about that in terms of people being panicked in water. Obviously, I don't know if you've been to Sydney, and Bondi is notorious for its very severe rips, and people in waist deep water panicking and being dragged out to the water because they are in that panic mode. So being calm, it's one thing that Dean preaches every day. Every time he's down at the beaches, he's talking about people being calm in the water because it will save your life.
Yeah, and you see this all. That's the main cause of deaths with scuba too. So equipment goes out, right? But you've got a minute and a half. If your buddy's over there, the key is to just, okay, shit's going really crazy right now. I'm going to stay focused and find that guy who's got the tank, who can share his air with me. But people go, and you're going to last 20 seconds. I mean, your heart rate's going to go up. You're going to use up all your oxygen. You're going to inhale water and you're toast. So it's the same thing here at Ocean Beach. We have nasty, nasty rips out here. And, people are out there wading in jeans from the valley. And you're like, oh, that's not a bad idea. Not a good idea to begin with, to be in your jeans and shoes. But whatever, I'm not here to judge. But these are the people that it has never experienced people in the water, never experienced surfers. It is always people who immediately panic. And that's something breathing can do. It can you can force your brain to calm down and think more logically.
Well, one of the points on that too, when we were talking to Dean, was I was trying to work out, that's so counterintuitive. That's like, what preparation do we need to do so you don't go into this panic state? And that was the question we talked about, is, let's say, having a childhood of nasal breathing and learning how to control, or let's say be at a less up state for more often, would that be the training to help you in that fight or flight moment? Because it sucks that life's like that. Why wouldn't you automatically want to be as calm and float away as possible?
Well, I think it's perceived threat. It's perceived fear. It's what we're conditioned with. I think if you know this stuff earlier, what a wonderful toolkit to carry around with you. We carry our breathing with us all the time, to use it to tune into different states and know that you're going to be affecting your physiology as well as your mental capacity is such an important thing. But I think it's also to get people to understand how their nervous systems work. So the more you breathe, the more you're going to get stressed. The less you breathe, the more control you breathe, the more you can bring that stress down. And actually, that's how you're able to conserve more oxygen and use less oxygen in those states. So just like with riptides, rip currents, people who survive allow themselves to stay in control. They go out, they get sucked out by the rip, and then guess what happens? You're either going right or you're going left, and then you can come back in, and they survive. I mean, as surfers, sometimes you want to take the rip out, but when people just fight against it, and I think some of that has to do with they just don't know any better. They're scared. It's good to be programmed that our bodies are like, when things are getting heavy, man, you get this surge of energy. You can fight really hard, or you can run away. That's all good stuff, but you have to keep that under control and know when you want to engage it, know when you don't want to.
Yeah, it's a great analogy for life, really, isn't it? In terms of being able to stay calm and know when to switch it on, whether it's a business or in high performance sport. It's definitely a good way to run your life.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Wim Hof method, whatever you want to call it, Tumo, Wim Hof method, Kriya. I mean, it's all doing the same stuff where you're like, okay, I'm going to stress myself out right now, and it's going to feel great because I'm in control of this stress. So when I'm in these states of stress, I can enter back into that state of control and own it. And the most amazing stories I've heard of these people with autoimmune diseases, with so many other problems, that once they take control of that stress, to understand where it's coming from, to know they can turn it off and to turn it on as well, then they are empowered to take control of their immune function too. And no one would have ever guessed that things like rheumatoid arthritis, that even type 1 diabetes, that chronic hypertension, all this stuff, we're like, this is incurable. The only way around it is to manage symptom
medication
pills. It's false. I could show you 1,000 people that have taken control of psoriasis, eczema, by taking control of their bodies. And this is where I think this stuff is really going. It's cool that you can hold your breath for 10 minutes. That's awesome. You can sit in ice for 2 hours. All awesome stuff. But if you're able to allow people who've been lied to for so long that they are defenseless against their illness, to give them control of that, that's the biggest gift that Wim has given to everybody by far.
And do you think there's a bit of, not to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole?
Yes, you are, Gareth. Don't lie.
Do you think it's, big pharma plays a big part of this, right? In terms of if we medicate people with breathing practices and teaching people to breathe properly, it's a loss of income to them, right? So they're obviously out there to discredit people like Wim and people like Patrick and, the Potato Clinic and all that kind of stuff in terms of, hey, this is a bit wacky. It's a bit wishy-washy. There's no real science to it. Take our pills. This is what's going to fix you. Do you think there's a little bit of that to it at the moment?
Well, their pills work, and I want to make that very clear. I'm not telling someone to go off all of your prescriptions, and because breathing's your way, brother. Like you can do anything. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that there is a way of approaching your own body and your own health to use these things at the same time to maybe decrease your level of bronchodilator use, maybe decrease oral steroids. And we know that's true. Okay. There's so many studies showing this. So this is not a panacea. It's not going to fix everything, but it's a wonderful foundation that you should start with this and see where it can take you, because it's not asking you to go keto or paleo or vegan. It's asking you to breathe differently. You're breathing all day long. So I don't point any fingers. I don't think it's concerted effort by big pharma to stop people from breathing healthy. I just don't. I think that this is so out of their range. They've got enough clients, at least in the U.S.
Yeah,
They're doing just fine.
They'll be all right. Yeah,
they don't care about the few that are taking control of their breath and are taking control of their illnesses right now. But I do find it curious in Britain, at least. Papworth method, which was developed in a hospital in the 1960s, which is just Buteyko breathing. It's the same thing. They were actively really trying to crush that and to show that it was on flimsy science. And you still hear this, even though, the UN, the Global Asthma Initiative, which was a partnership with the UN and WHO, and I think another organization, claimed that this stuff, like they first rated it an A rating for efficacy. They're like, the science is so clear. And then it got demoted to a B the year later, even though the science hadn't changed. And now you don't hear about it too much. So the good thing is, it's like we used to get everything from, news stations, newspapers, medical books, doctors. But people, I mean, just look at what's happened from nutrition. So at least in the US, people have absolutely ignored the food pyramid that has grains at the top, and then cakes and muffins are in there, and cereal. So everyone's just like, wow, if you've lied about us about that for 60 years, what else are you lying about? And we know that food has been completely co-opted by corporations. This is not new. This is not controversial. You could read a dozen books on this by Gary Taubes or Michael Pollan, and it's all very clear. No one's arguing with it right now, but it's interesting to look at breathing, because you can't really make too much money off of breathing. And so that's why I think one reason that this is so inspiring to get it out into the world and have people really start taking control of their own health.
One thing, James, and I'd be keen to hear how you process this. Took me a while just to get my head around that there's different types of breathing, particularly when I first came across it. And, you got Wim Hof, and then I came across Patrick, and you're trying to work out, would you say it's fair to say that there's just a spectrum of breathing? You've got breathing styles that activate you or reset. I think you've talked about in your book, push you to the edge, where the body takes over to think like, hey man, it's all on. And then there's the opposite side, which just brings, right back down. And it's kind of on us to just find the methods between.
Absolutely. And that's what was a little confusing to me at the beginning, because you talk to a lot of Buteyko people and they're like, you should only breathe slowly and breathe less. Do not ever breathe too much, which is false. And then a lot of people on the more Wim Hof side is, dude, you got to go to 11 every single time that you breathe. And both of them are extremely effective, but so is everything else in between. So what's the problem of having more tools in the toolbox to use at different times? And so I don't want to, that's why I did not attach in the book to one breathing method or to one school, because they all have benefits. It's like whole foods. I'm not talking about processed foods, but there's benefits of vegetables. There's benefits of protein. There's benefits of fat and avocados and all of that. And we know that. So, if maybe you were sitting still your entire life like a monk, you can just breathe very slowly because that's all you're doing. But in the Western world, you're exercising, you're running around, you're getting stressed, you're trying to go to sleep. So we're all over the map. So we can use breathing to balance us in each of those different situations. So this doesn't mean you need to memorize 500 different breathing techniques with all these crazy pranayama names. I tried to really simplify this in the book of saying, here are the major ways of thinking about this. Nasal, breathe less, but sometimes breathe more. And then you can pick whatever variety you want. What are the breathing more exercises? There's 200 of them. What are the breathing less? There's 200 of them. But they're all variations on the exact same theme. And they all, what I've found, the science shows, they're all doing basically the same thing.
Yeah. Well, something beautiful about, well, am I right that blinking and breathing are the only two auto things you can tap into and kind of take control over?
You can start, if you are an experienced yogi, as Swami Rama has shown us, you can, with the power of your mind, affect your heart rate. But that's like such next level shit. I didn't even really get into it, because no one can spend like 30 years in a cave in the Himalayas to get that down. In the meantime, breathing is both an unconscious action, which is great. We don't have to think about it, but it's also a conscious action. When we take control of it, we can take control of so much that's going on here. And that's really, really exciting to think like our bodies and their functions aren't a foregone conclusion. We can hack into them through breath.
Yeah. That's awesome. James, as like we don't want to take too much of your time, but would you humor us for maybe 10 more minutes where I might ask a few questions? So part of our business is we call it community wellness, and the other half is human performance. So I'm really interested in the how do you, the 5.5 breathing, the nasal breathing, bring it slow, bring it calm, particularly for some of our kids in our, Pacifica areas, which have the kind of, the bad insulation in housing, horrible respiratory system, stressful environment, and then add a pandemic on top. So we're in schools now just promoting, slow nasal breathing, and that is interesting, but it's in real time, and we've all been kicked into gear, which Gareth and I say, isn't it strange we couldn't have time to put together a proper business plan, but we're just in it, man. So that's why we're talking to you and attaching ourselves to these virtual mentors. Gareth will have a different take on that. But one of the things I wanted to ask, if it's okay, is like, it's fascinating to think about historically for me. I have this picture in my mind, let's say my Pacific ancestry, that they were known as navigators and they wouldn't have been sailing in a fight or flight. And one of the questions I had, if you could just maybe point me down the right direction, is I want to be able to show that for a narrative for our kids locally. And I know you can measure little bits in the skull. What should I be looking for if I can get a collaboration with people who have these ancestral archives?
I think the first thing is, if I had known the show was going out to kids, I would not have been cursing so much. So I would like to apologize to the children of New Zealand, because I really screwed that one up.
No. It's not. It's going out to
this was an adult program. Beyond that, I think that it's an interesting thing to start with when you're talking to kids, to try to get them to understand the importance of breathing and how far modern humans have strayed from healthy breathing, is to show them ancient skulls. And this absolutely stunned me when I ran across this. I thought, what am I doing looking at skulls? I'm talking about breathing, but there is such an absolute connection. And it frightened me too, that you show them an ancient skull of one of their ancestors, 1,000 years old, 2,000 years, 50,000, doesn't matter. Perfectly straight teeth, these gorgeous faces, wide faces, huge jaws. They had huge nasal apertures, much larger sinuses than we do. So by having that, you are naturally predisposed to be breathing in a healthy way. You're going to be much more apt to be breathing out of your nose. You're not going to be snoring. You're not going to have sleep apnea. You're not going to have these other respiratory issues. So we know this is true. We can't go back and measure if these people had respiratory issues, but we can look at their skeletons. Then you look at a modern skeleton, and we are so completely messed up. And I'm a great example of that. Clogged sinus passages, small nasal apertures, super small mouth. So once you acknowledge the problem, and I think that's a great way of starting, you don't think you're a bad breather now? Here's our ancestors. Here's where we are now. There's a problem here, but knowing the problem is empowering. Because once you realize the problem, you can say, how can we get back to the way our ancestors were? Because they didn't have so many of the health issues that we have now. And we know this. Okay, this is absolutely known. So how can we respect them for kicking butt for so long, for bringing me to where I am right now, and to return ourselves to that level of health in the modern world? So breathing's a huge part of that. And that's something that I became so fascinated with Native Americans, who had these systems, these technologies of breathing. They all shared in it. Same with indigenous cultures in South America. Same thing in Oceania. Same thing in China. Same thing in India. So this is not something humans haven't known. We've known this for a long time, and we've just forgotten about it temporarily, have a little amnesia, but let's bring it back.
Yeah, man. Yeah. All right, that's my question, Gareth. Over to you for your technical jargon.
I'm actually just going to ask about Joe Rogan. What was it like? I'm a huge fan of Joe. I'm an ex-fighter and a huge fan of the UFC. What was it like getting to sit down with Joe?
It was interesting on a number of different levels. He required me to go down to his studio in LA. I'm in San Francisco. This is a pandemic, so I had to drive down there, do a show, and drive back. It's about 7 hours each way.
Right.
So I was pretty fried when I showed up. But he's such an honestly like a nice, interested person. He's genuinely interested in this stuff, which you do not get from a lot of hosts.
Yeah.
And I was just trying not to think, that every single word I was saying is going to be blasted out to 10 million people, because that crossed my mind for a second. I was like, no. I'm in a room.
Don't think about that. Yeah.
And I'm talking. But, having a drive for 7.5 hours on the way back just gave me a lot of time for self-hate. And just like, I can't believe I didn't say that. Oh my God. I mentioned pH 7.4, which is true, but it's actually pH 7.39. Someone's going to, and so just all this. And then finally I just said, screw it. It is what it is. Yeah. I did what I could, and what can you do?
Awesome. We got a fair bit of self-hate too, because when I saw you on there, I was like, I text Gareth, fuck, he's on that show. I told you we should have been trying harder to get him. Now it's ruined. And it goes, calm down, go back to your nose. We've started the business.
Yeah.
We're ahead of it. And I think it's like, and then it was like it used to be easy to get in touch with Andrew Huberman, and then he went on, and now you can't touch him with 1,000-foot things. But anyways, I think it's interesting, and you must be aware of this, James, that there are these people like the Feinsteins and the Hubermans and yourself who have captured this kind of, if we follow him and follow, them, that there's something with the CO2 studies and how we the relationship to, anxiety. And it's I guess that's still all in real-time research, isn't it?
Well, what's fascinating about this, the subtitle of the book is New Science of a Lost Art, is they are literally rediscovering research that was all done 80 years ago. And this got cut out. I had this huge section about CO2 therapy, of how crazy it was for schizophrenics, for people with epilepsy, for people with metabolic disorders. I mean, it was like 30 pages. And I spent months on this, and my editor just went, snip. She's like, this is a book about breathing, dude. It's not about CO2. And so I am now fighting my way of getting some more of I was able to include like 3 pages of it, but that stuff is so crazy. And so what Huberman is finding, what Feinstein is finding, and I'll just mention to your listeners. So these are people that are looking at how people with anxiety and asthma and panic problems have very low CO2, which means they're breathing too much. They're off-gassing too much CO2. And by increasing that CO2, miraculously, they're like, I no longer feel anxious. I am literally no longer suffering from panic attacks. I'm no longer suffering from anxiety. I could show you a dozen studies that said this exact same thing in the 20s and the 30s. And later it was rediscovered in the 70s and the 80s, where Joseph Wolpe, one of the top psychiatrists, one of them, not the top, but one of the top psychiatrists in the biz, found that this was more effective than any other therapy, any drug at all. What happened when he released this study? 0. So now we've got Feinstein, we've got Huberman at Stanford. Both of them are doing incredible work. And I really hope now that the cat's out of the bag and that they can start using what is essentially a free therapy, which is one of the reasons there hasn't been too much interest in it. It's like CO2, that stuff's basically free, like an inhalation of CO2. But we know it works. The science is very clear that it works. And it's rumor is on the street. I won't give away too much of this, but Feinstein's early research is extremely promising. Really? And once this, and that's an NIH study, once this comes out again, now we have the internet. Now we have Joe Rogan. Now we have Instagram. Like, I think this stuff's really going to take off.
Yeah. Well, in one of our latest chats, so bit of context, Oxygen Advantage, Patrick McEwen's set up. Gareth's the first master instructor here in New Zealand. So that was a big win for us because, it's like, yes, Joe Rogan may have got you first, but I've got Gareth first. But I guess the funny thing there is Patrick was very clear with us. Hey man, we're still at the very beginning of this, so there's a lot of work to do, and don't worry, the horse hasn't bolted yet. And that's the sense I get is as people keep talking about it and keep understanding it, that something unconscious too, you just start switching to your nose, when you're listening to people, and you're much more aware of the habit of keeping your mouth open. Yeah, I've got one son who's is a mouth breather, and it's almost like I'm a bad dad. Like I'm constantly shutting his mouth now. I'm taping it at night. I'm like, I love you, and he can't even say I love you back. He's like, so it's just like, but I really do believe that will be a gift that I can give him, is that shut that mouth, that he's just got the braces. So I'm like, great, we get a chance to reset, and the tongue will be where it needs to be. Let's push that top palate out, because that's what came through in your book, is that whole facial redevelopment and what were the stem cells that am I right there?
Absolutely. And it's especially important for kids, right? You're setting the stage for what you're going to be later on in life. But I was inspired from being like an old person that you can still like affect your facial structure, the bone structure in your face, by chewing, which has a huge effect on your breathing. So this tones your airways. And I showed that very clearly in the CAT scans. But mine was just an ancillary story. Look at all the other case studies of this stuff. Look at all of the other research. And we know that kids who are mouth breathers versus those who are nasal breathers, their faces will look different. Because if your posture is like this, which mine was through much of my youth, your face is going to grow longer. So again, not a lot of controversy. They're going to have a harder time breathing too. So everything you're doing is, again, like, I don't view this stuff as negative. And I wasn't trying to make the book this bummer. Like, look at how messed up. Look at our skull. We're a disaster. We don't breathe right. Like, we have asthma, sleep apnea. It's the point of doing all that was to say, okay, we've got issues. Let's fix them. Now we can recognize those issues and recognize that so many of the chronic problems that people are suffering from are attached to breathing. And that connection, I don't think, has been made very clear. But it's being made much more clear now with all the research that's happening just in the last few years, and that all of the stuff that's going on now, I'm getting clued into some amazing studies that are happening now that are just going to further push this along.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it as well, as you touched on it earlier on, was, we've got the internet, we've got YouTube, we've got social media. A lot of these methodologies that may have been stuck away in a library or in a book or in a research lab, doesn't get out to the wider public, in the 30s, in the 20s, in the 40s. Now we have access to it. Most people can just jump on the old interwebs and find some research on anything they want to find research on. And it's so more readily available now. I think that's starting to cause a lot of this kind of snowballing effect of every other person is now talking about breathing.
There's a lot of hucksters in that world too. A lot of people that are trying to extort money who aren't qualified to do it. But I think people are skeptical enough that they're able to see through that and look at where this messaging is coming from, and then look at the science. If it's coming from Stanford and Huberman, his stuff checks out. If it's coming from Einstein, his stuff checks out. If it's coming from Harvard, this stuff checks out. So, that's why I included 500 scientific references with X-rays. Because people are like, there's no way you can straighten a spine with breathing. Dude, you did not do your research. And it's like, well, here are the X-rays, and here's all the science. And then they just quietly go away, and you never hear from them again. So that's why that's an ever-evolving thing on my site, which is available to anyone. And this is just a sliver of the research. This is the stuff I found, but there's so many other books out there. And, it was, you were saying something about digging through medical texts. Like, a lot of people aren't weird enough to do this crap. Like, I do this because this is what I do for a living. I get really into it, going through the stacks, and to be literally dusting off these books that are 60 years old and finding these truths that have never been disproven. It frustrates you, but at the same time, it's this treasure hunt where I'm just like, whoa, what else is there that we've already learned that we've forgotten about? And I mentioned food before. we've known this about nutrition. And 120 years ago, doctors were saying processed food is garbage. It's going to ruin your face. It's going to ruin your body. Yada yada yada. What did we do with that? Zero. But
Make
now
more of it.
Yeah. keep it down there. We're just gonna make more of this. But I think that in the modern age, you're looking at people like Rogan, who he gets the real people and the real field on there to talk about this stuff, and it's starting to blow up. It's sad that we now have to become our own doctors. We now have to second guess what we're hearing from medical institutions. But it's also empowering to think there's this movement of pissed off people who want to reclaim their health, and what a thrill it is to be on that wave.
Yeah, well, and there's something you can grab onto as well. Like what I found in the early COVID days is it's all too much and you can't do jack shit about it, but you can sit, like, for example, in the cold tub and do the slow 5.5 out. You can control that chaos or whatever we're talking about. And, it's a really nice thing to say. Like Gareth does a lot of work in mental health, working with people, but we realized the other day, or we put words to it, that no one ever talks about the foundation of breathing. It's always about, like, where are you on your journey, and what a horrible thing to forget, particularly with mental health, is where do you start? How are you breathing? And you'd mentioned it, the links to the brain and the left and right nostril, and if you're not using it, no wonder. And the pill, we talked about the pills before, but at a certain point they don't work either. And our suicide statistics show that. People just, whatever happens there. So I definitely don't want to put us down in a place of this is a one-stop shop, but it's a hell of a stop at a shop to breathe properly.
It's, to me, and just sort of piggybacking on what you said, you start with this foundation. Here's something you can do for free, and let's start there instead of starting you on take 3 of these pills every single day for hypertension or for whatever you have, whatever problem, anxiety. Why don't we start with this foundation here? Then we can build up where breathing doesn't take you, where these other lifestyle changes don't take you. Pharmaceuticals can work really, really well, right? But instead, it's like you start people up here with the most extreme measure instead of giving them the foundation upon which so much of health relies. And that's breathing, and especially with mental health stuff. And you're right, if depression, if anxiety were all biochemical, then man, all these drugs should work perfectly because they're changing the biochemistry of your brain. Well, guess what? SSRIs work about the same as a placebo, and there's been a zillion studies showing this. If you have extreme anxiety and depression, yes, that they work, okay? But for mild or moderate, for the vast majority of people taking these, they work no better than a placebo. And there's been so many studies on this in top scientific journals. And yet what happens? Doctor, I'm feeling anxious. here's your kit for this month. And this isn't to take away from these pills. Some people absolutely need them. They're so helpful as training wheels, right? To get your life back together, to calm yourself down. I've seen people really transformed by them. They're not a permanent solution. So breathing has to be involved in this conversation in some capacity. It's been shocking. It's been so forgotten, but it does seem, with what you guys are doing, you wouldn't be able to do this 10 years ago, So it feels like there's a big wave coming, and this stuff is going to be proven. It's already proven, but more people are going to see the immediate and long-term benefits of taking your breath into your own control.
Yeah.
With the what you were just saying with the CO2 stuff, James, is there going to be another book diving deeper into CO2, perhaps?
Well, I have to tell you something. Since the books come out, I'm hearing from CO2 researchers from all over the planet, and they're on to some mind-blowing stuff I won't tell you about, but CO2 plays a role in head injuries. It plays a role in COVID. What? COVID? Yes, it does. And this is research at top institutions. So I can't write another book about breathing. It would but I can update the paperback, which I plan to do here and there, just put some cool little updates in there. But that will be the job of somebody else to write the book about my work in this specific subject. I think is pretty much maxed out.
And James, how long does this kind of your interviews and stuff, doing podcasts go on for? I mean, infinite, or are you kind of got a cutoff point to say, hey man, I got to move on and find something else?
That's a question I ask myself every night when I'm sitting there with some lozenges and just be like, my wife's like, how many more of these are you going to do, dude? Because she hears me. I'm downstairs. She's got to listen to all this crap every day, 5 hours a day. But having said all that, I'm just being facetious and being a jerk. I'm so pumped to talk about this stuff. When it gets really boring and when it feels rote and when it feels mechanical, and when I don't feel emotionally attached to it, I'm going to absolutely stop. But for 4 months, I've been doing these all day, every day. I'm hearing from different people around the world. And man, it just really gets me pumped up, especially people who are taking an active interest in the field and are trying to not only change their health, but trying to get this out to other people and really create that positive wave. It really pumps me up. So to answer your question, I have no idea. I thought it was going to be 2 weeks apiece, and now it's 4 months, and I'm still here in the same Zoom shirt. So hopefully,
that's
still looking good.
What's it like being James Nestor at the moment? Obviously, like you're saying, and you guys are in
fucking rock star.
In the grips of COVID, like we were. Probably a little bit.
Show him your tattoo, Gareth. Show him your tattoo of him.
What's it like going outside and being James Nestor out in the public? Are you being mocked by people?
I know that there's like some public perception that when like your book catches and you start doing these things, like you're going to get the good seat at the
velvet ropes are parting. No.
No one cares about an author, man. If you were in a hot movie or if you're a rock star, no one cares about like some middle-aged dude. Like no one's recognized me on the street.
Right.
Plus, we're in a pandemic. It's different if you're like touring and you're doing big presentations and you're going out to dinner and you're talking to researchers. Then you're like, oh, this is pretty fun, right? I've lived my world in 2-3 years in a hole. Now I'm out in the world. This is cool. But I sit in the downstairs of my house, do these all day, walk my dog and go to sleep. So that's the glamorous life, the same pair of shorts, the same shirt. So zero has changed. We're hoping things are, when they open up, I definitely want to go out and tour this around a bit and talk to more people like you who are making huge waves, huge change, huge consciousness shift right now, which is what we need. If anything good has come out of this stupid pandemic, it's like people are getting more tuned in to how important breathing is and how important their health is.
Yeah.
Gareth, we'll do one more question, otherwise we'll never stop, and then James will just turn his internet off. James, just my question, like, is there a let's say someone's come across this, and that's possible here in New Zealand because we're a bit behind, but is there a breathing technique or something that you would feel comfortable sharing to that is not dangerous and water or all of this type of stuff? Like, what's the simplest way into this if you're very skeptical as a person?
Sure, that's a great question. First of all, the nose. I think we drilled that one into the ground. But beyond that, this seems so simple that people are like, oh, that's not going to do anything. But if you have a blood pressure monitor, if you have heart rate variability monitor, even if you have a pulse oximeter, even if you just want to take your pulse with on your wrist here, there you go. Yeah.
For anybody that, So it's a little pretty inexpensive little tool to measure your blood oxygen.
But if you're skeptical, it's one thing to feel something. Then a lot of people they feel better and they're like, oh, maybe that's just the placebo effect, which is not true. But it's another thing to see data and to see measurements. So if you have any of those things, what I would suggest doing is just to breathe in at a rate of about 5 to 6 seconds and breathe out at that same rate, about 5 to 6 seconds. Maybe lengthen the exhale a little bit more to about 7 or 8, but only do what's comfortable for you. When I've explain to people how to do. I usually don't lead breathing stuff because I'm not a breathing therapist. But when I've explained to people before, the last guy was just like, yeah, it's fine. But for this exercise, chill out. This whole exercise is about letting your body relax and restore and become balanced. So if that means 4 seconds in and 4 seconds out, that's what I want you to do. And do this for just a couple minutes. Take your blood pressure before and your blood pressure after. I have borderline higher blood pressure. I've seen mine go down about 2 minutes, 10 to 15 points, which no drug can do, no diet can do. But your breathing can do this. And you can see it for yourself. If you're a snorer, you can try some sleep tape. That's a little more advanced. And one thing I would do throughout the day, if you're anxious, is to extend those exhales. You can put your hand on your heart to breathe into a count of about 4 and breathe out to count about 6 or even 8 if you can do that comfortably. And every time you breathe out, you're going to feel your heartbeat slowing down because that's eliciting a relaxation response. The more you exhale, the more you're going to relax yourself. These are free tools. You're not going to hurt yourself doing them. We know they work. And it's just a wonderful thing to have at your disposal anytime.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Anything else, Gareth? Because it's an awesome way to end the podcast. James, we'll wrap it there. You've been on Rogan. We don't have to promote anything if they've found. It's weird if they found us before you, but can we just thank you, man, for taking time? You said it 4 months every day, but I will say that, look, these couple Kiwis here really appreciate it. There's not that many people around New Zealand who are talking like this, and that's very evident because we're having to go for the top hitters at the moment just to get these conversations started. But far out, it's really meaningful and quite scary because the implications of this stuff, particularly the forgotten stuff, is like, what the hell? Gareth lifts heavy things and I'm a former rugby player. What the fuck have we got to do with breathing? But it's a burden on us and we just got to carry it on. So we're doing it. And just thanks for your work, mate. It's really cool.
Thanks a lot for you guys for having me. Really, I mean that. And thanks a lot for asking me completely different questions. I mean, that's really good. You see how animated I got. It's like, wow, these are different questions. So appreciate that. Let me know if you need anything else. Good luck with all your stuff.
On another note, James, I just giving you a bit of props for your beard there. I own a organic men's skincare company. And if it's all right with you, I would like to send you some beard products as a gift from Will and myself to you, if that's all right.
I'm going to take that as a gentle hint that things are getting a little out of hand. This is the first time I've done it. This is what happens. You lock someone in a house for 7 months. Got nothing else to do. Why not get the beard going?
It's a good one, man. You've done well. Yeah.
Send it. I'd love it. I'd love it.
Awesome.
Perfect. Will do.
All right. Well, James, we'll let you go. Thanks again, and we'll touch base soon, eh?
Awesome. Sounds good. Take care, guys.
Okay, Gareth, look, man, I think we wrap it up. It was a nice, long podcast, meaty for people to get into. Takeaways, obviously, James highlighted, thanks for the conversation, right? These were less questions, more just a yarn. And I guess one of the things that people interested in breathing is helping is that there's a wave of understanding, almost like an acknowledgement. Maybe this is a bad example, but back in the day, if you went to war, there was a common language, of understanding that things can go wrong. And I think that's those of us who are in the breathing world now, the implications if you don't breathe properly. And it doesn't go anywhere good. So that's why we have the shorthand, right? Like, we give a damn. And I think that came through. How was that chat for you? I mean, are you still buzzing?
Yeah, amazing. Just so insightful. Like I said in the intro, just incredibly insightful. Very well articulated. And I'm glad that he did touch on the fact that this was a different chat for him. We threw some different questions to him and, talked about some stuff outside of breathing. And, like he did say in the podcast, this has been 4 months of just people wanting to talk to him. So I guess it can get a little bit hard, just having to say the same thing and answer the same question. So I'm glad that he looked like he enjoyed it.
I would love to have him to be recording on that 7-hour drive home from Rogan.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it actually surprised me that he was like, I guess you would be. You're thinking about the things that didn't go right, you know, and I guess, you know, that's one of the things that we won't ever see. And I mean, we have that internally between you and I, right? Like, it's the thing that we have to be our own critics and have the hard conversations. But when you're dealing with something as important as, you know, the lack of knowledge around functional breathing, gosh, man, it is so very important. Okay, team, I think we'll wrap it up here. Just a reminder that if you are looking for breathing services, or you would like to share kind of our services, you can find us a couple ways. www.manavabreathing.com, or if you search Oxygen Advantage online and go to the Master Instructors page, you'll see the very friendly and hug conscious and skin conscious.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna like put you on the spot for all of the amazing things.
Yeah.
The man who has the 24-hour record for flipping a tractor tire, and so on and so on. Gareth Edwards is a master instructor and can train you. Functional breathing, Oxygen Advantage, scientific ways to be better at breathing, which is crucial now, because as we get over the pandemic, it's about where to from here. And I think if you breathe better, that gives you a better shot at that. Any final thoughts, Gareth, before we sign off and move on with our day?
We need to get in touch with Joe.
Oh, don't start that. That's your job, okay? That's your job. I ain't emailing that dude. I'll crap my pants before pushing send. But how about that as a goal, that we could find ourselves to be part of this narrative and to find something that isn't talked about every day, you know, like our work with Professor Grant Schofield and Patrick McEwen. It's like, this journey isn't over and not everything's been revealed. And I think that's our easiest bet to find our way there, is that, you know, we're on the path to finding out what are those things that, you know, that help us, because that's what it's about. It's like, you can suppress it, but it doesn't go anywhere. It manifests in horror, you know. And that's what's so exciting about this. Where else can we go? What do they talk about when they sit in the cave, or what are they doing when they sit in the cave for 30 years? You know, what is it exactly? Do we transcend? Do we, you know, can you achieve the psychedelic state through breathing? Probably. It's just a case of, you know, what are the conditions and everything. So anyway, if we don't get on that way, just email them. Maybe send them some beard oil.
Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah. All right, team. Thanks everybody for listening. Back next week with another awesome podcast. And until then, thank you so much for sharing a breath with us. We'll see you in the next episode.